Cool. All right. So we got Jess Lewis, current teacher up at the Link School up in BV. Thanks for being here, Jess. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I'm super excited. This is like a really great part of my day.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Glad to have the opportunity to catch up with you a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about your work experience, education, just some of the stuff you've done because your background is fascinating. Um, so
Wow.
it's been really cool kind of following your adventures for the last couple of years via social media. So yeah, I'm excited to hear more.
Great.
Um, yeah, if you could just real quick give us like a quick summary of your professional experience and kind of how you got here.
Sure. I'll make it as quick as possible. My parents are both guides, and so I was really fortunate to just like grow up in this outdoor world and realized quite young that guiding and education were really important to me. And so I started guiding when I was like 14 and guiding backcountry horsepacking trips and backpacking and that sort of thing. And then when I was 18, sort of shifted that into a lot more technical guiding, that being whitewater kayaking and, multi-pitch rock climbing, and just like ran with it and guided all over the world. And through those years sort of figured out like what avenues were interesting to me and realized like, oh, I don't love just guiding people up a peak all the time, because that doesn't amount to much. You don't really feel like you're making, or I didn't feel like I was making like a difference in people's lives. Like they had a great day, that was awesome, but I wanted more than that. And so I sort of shifted back into having this blend of like outdoor ed kind of guiding and then those more technical days. And that's been awesome because that feels really sustainable to me, to be able to, jump on a river and take people down a river for 10 days, or, take a group of kids for a month and go have it be this like therapeutic wilderness experience, and then have days out multi-pitch rock climbing. And so that blend has really worked for me. And yeah, and then I'm also a writer, and my writing is really informed by my experiences in the wilderness, and those two things also like really go together for me. And if I didn't have that time outdoors, I probably wouldn't have anything to write about. Yeah, at least that's how I feel about it. And so yeah, I sort of just like bring all these things into my daily life and have created a poor but very satisfying profession for myself.
That
Yeah.
sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess we could start with like the kind of difference between guiding and outdoor education. Like where have you found kind of pros and cons in each area? Like what satisfies you about it, outdoor education versus guiding, or what excites you about guiding versus outdoor education?
Yeah, nice. I think that's a great question, and something that's really worth exploring for ourselves, because there are really good things on both sides of that wall. And with outdoor education, what's amazing about it is that what you're doing, like you're making a difference in someone's life, and we don't always get to know what that difference is. And I think as humans, like we want to know the impact we're having, and so we're constantly looking for that. But with outdoor ed, like you can trust that your care for people, that time we take in terms of the soft skills that we really give people, and helping them work through fear and discomfort and that sense of vulnerability in the wilderness, that makes a difference in people's lives far beyond that wilderness experience. And that's what I love about outdoor ed. Yeah, because it makes a difference in people's lives, most people's lives. Some people don't care. and, and with technical guiding, like I love that stuff because it's really interesting to me, and I love having an advanced skill set. And for me, that's what's really empowering. And so the outdoor ed is a way that I can give. And then for me, technical guiding is a way that I can sort of give to myself, and, have those things that push me and challenge me and that require this high level of excellence. And so that's that's sort of my way to be doing things in my life that I find challenging, and that I'm constantly being asked to be better, be fitter, be more skilled, be staying up with the times. And so maybe it's a little bit selfish, but I do a lot of that technical guiding because that's a component of my life that I really need. I need that challenge. Then I also really want to be able to give, and that's why the outdoor educational piece really fits in.
That's a really interesting perspective. I hadn't heard that before, of kind of guiding, pushing you with your technical skills and kind of pushing you to constantly be better. Whereas
Yeah.
education is more of like a developmental piece. Do you find that, with education and guiding, kind of the difference is, guiding, you're sort of planting the seed for, somebody to get into outdoor adventure, or planting the seed for them to like have an experience, versus outdoor education is more of like you're walking alongside somebody and kind of watching their development as you go.
Sorry, rephrase that question for me really quickly.
Yeah, does it feel sometimes like guiding is more, you're just like planting the seed of like, hey, this is, if you take somebody rock climbing one day and
Right.
they've never been rock climbing before, and you're just sort of like, hey, this is rock climbing, this is what it looks like. And then after that, you don't really have experience with them, versus, and they
Yeah,
may go off and like that's their new pursuit, or they might never rock climb again, versus outdoor education is sort of, you get to watch them kind of grow into the sport.
exactly. Yep. Sometimes with technical guiding, especially if you're on a bigger objective, you have that opportunity to really like pull people into the sport. But also on bigger objectives, people probably already have an interest or have a little bit of a background. Like, it's pretty rare that you like go take someone up a desert tower who's never climbed before.
Mm.
Although I did do that this summer and I don't recommend it. Experience. I like got to the base of the tower and I was talking to my client and learned that she'd never climbed outside and didn't know how to belay. And I was like, sick. Okay.
That's going to be a problem.
When you're doing these bigger objectives, people already have, some amount of experience, and they take guides because they know that, they don't have their own knowledge to like go ski this peak or whatever it is. But yeah, those like one day or half day experiences, those can be really tough. And like, there can be incredibly rewarding things in those, but I'd say more often than not, like, it's just an entertainment piece for people, and that's totally valid. And like, what a great thing that they're choosing to have their entertainment be, going river rafting for the day versus going to a movie or whatever it is. I think those things are really valuable, but I think as a guide, it's really nice to have other things that are a little more fulfilling in your own experience.
So kind of with that dynamic of the people, just, they may be experienced, and they essentially hire you to kind of facilitate their experience to go above and beyond what they're capable of. What are some of the challenges you've found in that with some of your clients, on some of the terrain that you've guided on?
Yeah, hubris would be the biggest with clients in that setting. Sometimes you get your own return clients, and then that's great because you've been teaching them. And so, when you say, well, here's how we're going to come into an anchor, and this is what I need you to do, for them, it's like a review, and they're like, okay, got it. But so often when you get someone who has had experience, it's often not been with you, and they have all these things that maybe someone else has told them, or they were told 5 years ago, and they really feel like they're quite skilled at paddling, and this class 5 rapid should be just fine. And you think, oh dear God. And so that can be a really big challenge to manage, is validating people and teaching them and having them feel like they really get some ownership in their experience, which I think those return clients really want. And also effectively guiding, because it's this constant balance with guiding of teaching people and allowing some room for like exploration and error and keeping people safe. And there are those times guiding, either in outdoor ed, but in that like more technical guiding world, where like you just have to drop all pretense of building any sort of relationship with your client and like just trying to keep people safe. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have to walk a pretty fine line a lot of like maybe not shouting down your client and saying like, no, this is how it's going to go, versus making them feel like, you know, okay, you do have some expertise and here's how we're going to apply it.
Yeah, exactly. And um, I think all guides struggle with that to some degree because people are people, and when our clients come in, they have their own expectations and desires and sense of what they know or don't know. And then women guides in particular really struggle with that, unless you're guiding a woman, and then often it's easier. But that's a real component to the guide world for sure.
Have you had a lot of experiences where like male clients like are essentially sexist in the way that they approach their guided experience?
Oh, like every day. Yeah.
Really constantly.
Yeah.
Oh,
I I was head guide at a river company for a while, and I just started including as like the regular spiel in my safety talk uh, at the beginning, because I would never have the guys' attention in the group like, hey, I know I'm a woman, but you need to pay attention to me, and just like calling people out on it. And that's usually when people are like, ooh, like that was me. And that's benign, but yeah, I've had some really intense experiences with clients, both men and women, who um you know have even said like, well, I don't trust you, or because you're a woman, or there's no way you're as strong as these male guides. And being like, okay, I'm the head guide, but I will happily like put you on the rope team or in the boat of that new guide if you want. Yeah, it's amazing to me how prevalent it can be. And and the hope is always that the more women who are in the industry and the more allies we have with the men that we work alongside, that will change. And it is changing, but it happens slowly. Yeah.
that's yeah, that's always devastating. Like I know that exists, and I just wonder how much do you think that is like a conscious perspective from some of your clients, and how much of it is like a subconscious reaction?
I think a lot of it's subconscious, especially if you're a woman on a guide team and you're the only woman on a guide team, and clients look around and you're like the smallest person there, and they're like, don't want to be with that person, for whatever it is, skiing and rock climbing and rafting. Like, it always seems that, men are associated with strength and women are not, which we all know is not true. And like, those strengths are different. And so some of it's definitely not conscious, and that's sort of like the easier one to work with, because all then you have to do is like demonstrate your skill, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
got it. Or like pull them out of the river, and then they're just really happy that you're there. But some of it isn't unconscious, and that's where it gets really tricky with clients. And maybe that's the beauty of outdoor education too, is then you have the opportunity to really work with people in that perspective. And when you're not in an outdoor ed setting, you either deal with it or you stop the day. Sometimes you stop the day. Yeah.
So can you, man, yeah, we could talk for hours just about this topic, because I think it is extremely prevalent, and it guts me that as an outdoor educator and guide, like I have to do less work to have the respect of clients than you do, just because I'm a male, and that's insane to me, because by all accounts you are far more qualified and far more like technically skilled, than myself or like most of the male guides that I know. So it's just insane that you have to work so much harder to earn that just entry level respect from clients. Um,
One thing I think about a lot, whether I'm doing outdoor ed or in that technical guiding scene, is the thing that I think about going into the day is this quote that says that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I always start with establishing like as much rapport as I can with people, because yeah, they're not going to care if you're a skilled guide or not, unless they feel like you're really there for them, and to be kind to them, and to bring them along on their journey on whatever that is. And if you start with that, it can be so helpful, or it is so helpful. And I think oftentimes women understandably sort of get stuck in this feeling of like, I have to prove myself. And like, yeah, sometimes you do, but you do that just by being there and doing your job well. And if you're genuine and kind to people, that like really promotes that feeling of trust, and people sort of stepping back from that perspective of like, well, it's a woman and like I can't, like not skilled, not going to trust her. And so I think about that almost every day when I'm guiding.
So I mean, we have a lot of students in the outdoor ed program who identify as female and are trying to become guides. And I think that's phenomenal advice. Do you have any other like tips, tricks, like any other advice for aspiring guides?
Both men and women. Yeah, I think find the thing that you love and don't be concerned about like what that looks like on paper, if it's going to like get you to this end goal. Like if you're doing work that you're passionate about, these avenues will open for you. And for some people, like that is just technical guiding, and that's awesome. And go do that. And for other people, it's like staying in that outdoor ed role. I think there's such this negative sense of ego often in the guiding world of like, you have to accomplish this thing, right? You have to be a fully certified AMGA guide. You need to be a class 5 whitewater kayaker, whatever it is. And like, those things are awesome. But equally awesome is being that person who takes the kindergartners out on their nature walk and like teaches them leave no trace principles, And so just say like, drop any sense of ego around guiding and like do the thing that you actually feel like is both fulfilling your life and is allowing you to give in whatever capacity you're feeling called to give into your community, because that's what makes it sustainable. And yeah, and those, those things change, and there are years that like I'm far more interested and focused on that technical guiding, and then there are years where like I just want to like take people into the wilderness, and that can, be whatever it is. And so I just feel like finding that humility and that joy in being out is the way to make guiding work, because there are so many different things to do within the guide world. Yeah.
So like, just that kind of that idea of constantly feeling like you should be doing more, should be doing something different with your like,
right.
Yeah,
that you're not legitimate, or what you're pursuing isn't legitimate unless you've achieved this bar. Whatever. Like if you're a certified guide, awesome. If you're not, great. Just like do what works for you. Yeah. And like own that.
I can relate to so much of that, because I feel like in the guide world, like there's another tier that you always feel like you should be hitting, or you should be preparing for, or you should be striving toward. And like you can just feel like you're never doing enough to get to that point. Or even if you're like pushing to get to that next level, there's a whole other discipline that you're like, I'm neglecting my mountain bike skills right now, or my teaching leave no trace skills, just to be able to be a better rock climber or something like that. So it's really good advice. I'm getting a ton out of this right now.
Me too. Things as I speak. So
this is very affirming for me. So thank you. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the kind of the outdoor education piece. Can you talk about some of like the jobs you've had in outdoor ed and how you kind of got to those positions?
Sure. So I'm currently working at an outdoor educational high school. So I have my master's degree in creative writing. And so I'm the English teacher here, but also program staff. And so like this afternoon, we're going to go kayak over there. And I fell into this job for a number of reasons. COVID is one of the reasons that I'm here, was feeling like I wanted a consistent check rather than chasing guide work around the world. But I was in the outdoor ed educational role, like through some really cool summer camps that did some like pretty legitimate programs where I was like running the backcountry horse program for this camp for a number of years. And then at the school that I'm currently at, I worked as a resident assistant when I graduated from college. And that year, at that point in my life, I felt like, okay, this is great, but I really want to focus on technical guiding. And so I left the school and went and did technical guiding for a number of years, and really brought up both my certifications and my skills, and loved that. And that was fulfilling for me, but did realize in that amount of time, like, oh, like this isn't fulfilling enough. Like I need to be able to give. And so have been shifting back into programs that allow me to do both, and just like seeking guide companies that, have 3-day to 2-week-long courses where I get to teach people the skills that I love so much, and that it is that outdoor ed piece. And I've mostly been working with adults, and I really enjoy that a lot. And then a few years ago realized that even more than working with adults, I also really wanted to work with women. And so I think you just find the things that feel inspiring to you. And so you start seeking those companies that have that. And sometimes you might not find those companies, so you start your own. But yeah, so I started guiding for companies through the United States. At that point, I had been living in South America for about 5 years and came back so I could do more of that outdoor ed piece and not just the technical guiding. And companies want to see soft skills. Hard skills are great, but people really want to see those soft skills and like know that you have that. And I think that's always a piece that guides can be better on and improve with. So
Yeah. So with the international work, how did you decide to pursue work outside the United States, and what was that process like of getting that employment, actually getting to the country, working there, and then what were some of the barriers that you kind of ran into working internationally?
sure. I've worked for US companies abroad, and they take care of all those barriers for you.
Yeah.
But when I lived in South America, I went because it's Patagonia and everyone wants to go to Patagonia. And I found myself a job as a whitewater kayak guide, and headed down there for that. And that job actually fell through really quickly. It was not a good fit. And so then I just sort of like found myself in South America jobless, and knew that I had these skill sets, and so just found ways first to like integrate myself into the community that was there, and then jobs came from that, and then I fell in love with it and I stayed there. And the really neat thing about working in some other countries overseas, this isn't true everywhere, but Europe and Chile in particular have really high guiding standards, and you have to like take local tests that are quite difficult. It's the hardest guide test I've ever taken was down there. And so that was actually a really cool thing, because then I got to I got to continue to develop those skills. And the barriers are language, and the barrier is working really hard in a place where you don't make any money, and so you sacrifice a quality of life for different things. And and if that works for you, then it's great. And that worked for me for a long time and was so fulfilling in those ways. And visas are always really tricky things. Like it complicates life, but it's also such a enriching part of life. I highly recommend that if you want to work overseas, just like snagging a US company who works overseas, because that makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess with that, kind of two questions. How do you find out about international outdoor jobs? First question, like either with an American company or with a local company in a different country. And then what kind of benefits have you seen from those experiences that you've applied to your work life now?
Well, I think the best way to find a job overseas is, like, for example, I wanted to guide Aconcagua. And so I just Googled, climbing Aconcagua guided, right? As if I was a client. And I'm like, look, these 5 companies do it. and then figured out like where I maybe had ties or other guides I knew that worked within those companies, and then you network in that way. And the great thing about the guiding world is that it's quite small realistically, and it is really easy to network. And having that person who knows somebody who can give you an introduction to the head guide or whatever, it goes an incredibly long way. That I just spent the last year in Antarctica guiding, and that was largely how like that door was opened for me, was through that networking. In terms of what the second part of your question was, like the benefit that I've seen from those experiences now, I think what those experiences really teach you is like how to deal with adversity and how to deal with like a lot of discomfort, and like have that appreciation for, you know, the things that we have here in the United States, but really being able to like relate to your clients. Because when you do go guide overseas, whether you're doing a big mountain or you're like doing a tour, is that like it's harder, right? And you get sick and the food's weird and you're not sleeping and it's freezing cold, you know, like whatever it is, it's never as comfortable as it is when you're home. And so just like learning how to deal with that adversity and learning within yourself, just like how to continue to like find what's good and be joyful and show up in the best way that you can for the people that you're there for. And you just like learn a lot of personal strength through those experiences, I think.
That's great. Just curious, did you work with Alpine Ascents when you worked in South America? Was that the company that you were working with for
No,
Aconcagua?
I didn't work for a US company. I was working for South companies. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about Antarctica? That's insane. Like what was that like? Yeah.
Antarctica was fascinating. So I was actually working for the government down there, and I was a deep field mountaineer. And so my job was supporting science in the deep field. There's a really amazing climate change project happening down there. It's a joint project between the British and the United States, and the amount of infrastructure that goes into supporting things that happen in Antarctica is incredible. And so I was head of search and rescue on the western half of the continent, and for like all countries. And but then my like day-to-day job was reading radar to find crevasses as we traversed a glacier, which sounds really cool and was very boring. But that was like often happens in the outdoor industry, that's like so important that you do it right, and should be really boring if you're doing it right. And if it gets exciting, like you've made a big mistake and like you're in trouble at that point. So Antarctica was fascinating, and it's a fascinating place, and it's hard and it's beautiful, and was easily the most challenging experience of my life, and largely due to people down there. And you know, just talking about like, what do those overseas experiences do? Like that experience like really showed me like where I fell short on being able to handle adversity, and like what I needed to learn about myself, and taught me like where some of my limits were, and how to have some self-care pieces that maybe I didn't have before. And it's hard when you get pushed to a point of like feeling some desperation, and like I definitely felt that down there. Is incredibly isolating, but I learned a lot from that, and I don't regret having been there at all. But I also am not prepared to repeat that experience right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Some solid type 3 fun.
I put it in like the 4 or 5 category. It was unlike anything I've ever done before. And Antarctica is like hard as a continent in the best circumstances. And Antarctica was impossible in like the worst of circumstances, was what I experienced. But that's okay, because I know that time down there is only gonna going to benefit me in the things that I'm doing now and the things that I'm doing in the future. And so it was really hard, but I also know that I learned a lot. So
That's amazing. Cool. So
real cold down there.
yeah, I get so
No humans are from Antarctica.
so were you operating out of a base camp, like an indoor facility and then like going outdoors, or were you like in
I was
remote?
in like a little mountain tent the whole time. And
Wow.
yeah, so we moved every day, and I was on a team of 4 people, 3 guys and myself, and we were actually driving tractors, like legitimate tractor, not like a snow camp. We were driving tractors across the continent, and we had this like 10 by 16 foot tent that the guys lived in, and then I just lived in a little mountain tent that I would get set up, and yeah, good
There's
time.
not enough there's not enough down in the world to keep me warm in that
No.
kind of cold.
I like never took my clothes off. I had a big like fleece liner and then 2 like 60 below bags, wrapped in on each other. And then I'd
Mhm.
just like fill my sleeping bag with hot water bottles. And yeah, and some nights I couldn't sleep because I was too cold. And then, solar noon happened at 6 a.m. where we were. And so then
Yeah.
when I got up in the morning, it was usually, like around 20 below or so, which seemed pretty warm. And it was always like easier to get out of my sleeping bag at that point.
That is brutal.
Going to sleep was always really hard.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I'll pass on that experience.
There are warmer parts of the continent.
Yeah.
The continent is not warm, but there are warmer parts of the continent.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
not for me. My circulation's not good enough to. I would die.
Yeah.
Oh, so making a pretty hard transition. Can you talk a little bit about your writing career?
Oh, sure. Um, my writing career started when I was like in middle school. Was the first time I had something published, um, and I don't know. I just always have felt like I had something to say about whatever it is, usually outdoor related. I write a lot about the environment, and I think what's important to me about writing and the reason that I feel compelled to do it is that news, which I listen to a lot, often I think falls really short of action, right? We like get these like shock and awe things, and we're all engaged in listening to the news or reading it or whatever, but like there's never this impetus to action. And as someone who like deeply cares about the environment and deeply cares about communities and connection among people, like I want there to be action. I want people to not just feel intrigued by what's happening, but to feel like they are empowered to do something. And so my writing has always been about connecting people to the land, connecting people to people, finding those things within ourselves that we want to explore and deepen. And so I often write about the environment and like take the adventures and the places that I'm on. And I rarely am writing like a story about the awesome rock climb I did. I'm instead writing about boating in Anwar for 3 weeks and watching the caribou migrate. The porcupine caribou herd is like the biggest land migration in North America, and like being in the middle of that migration and considering what it means like in this magical moment to have drilling up in the Arctic, and trying to have people feel a little bit more with the writing. And writing in lots of ways is like inherently selfish. Like we also do it for ourselves, and I think people who like are writers know that. But yeah, my hope has always been that it calls people to action in some way, like makes them feel enough that they're compelled to learn more, to do something. And so that's why I started writing, and that's why I continue to write. And it's hard to find avenues sometimes that fit that or the time, but it always feels valuable when I'm like really engaged in the process.
What does that process look like? Do you have like a topic or something you want to speak first, and then you kind of write that out, and it's sort of like an expression of what you're feeling, and then you submit that to different publications, or do you pitch like, hey, I have this idea to the publications, and they give you like the yay or nay on whether or not you should
Yeah,
write it for them?
with nonfiction writing, you often do pitch ideas. That's how the industry works. That's not how I've ever done it. uh, write complete articles that come to mind and then send them out.
Mm.
And um, I journal typically every day, but certainly whenever I'm in the backcountry. And the difference between like the kind of writing I do in the backcountry and the kind of writing I do for publication is like I'm really just jotting down my thoughts about whatever I'm, seeing and feeling and working through within myself. But then it's always like such a good touch point when I go back and feel like, is there something to actually be said about this experience? Is there something that is more meaningful beyond my own processing right now? And like oftentimes there's not, and then sometimes there is. And then I have this, record of thought that I can really draw from and pull into something bigger. And sometimes I'll go into an experience like knowing beforehand that I want to find something meaningful that it can be moved into like a publication piece. And I sort of have these like set of prompts in my head that I often write to that are these like reflective prompts that help me sort of like tease those threads out that I think have like a more universal meaning beyond myself. And I often think about those when I'm out or when I get back. And then sometimes like whole things just come to you, like that piece I had published on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. I was like sitting writing about something else, and all of a sudden like the whole piece came into thought, and I had to drop everything I was doing, and I just went and like typed the whole article and I sent it off for publication, and it was published. And I think when you're in the practice of writing and thinking deeply about things, that sometimes the writing is just like, here, let me like present myself to you. But yeah, I think it's always that question of like, what do you actually have to say about this that's different or meaningful? Stories are amazing, but stories need to have like a purpose, and it's figuring out what that purpose is that matters.
It's encouraging to hear that too, because I think so many times, with the outdoors, like it draws in artists, but I think it rewards engineers a lot of the times, like specifically like the technical disciplines. Like you hear so much about, specifically in rock climbing, like there's so much of the technical aspect. You get to focus so much on that, and like the mountains are pretty, but like how good of an anchor did you build, and like how clean of a pick off can you do?
Yeah.
But it's always a good reminder to just, like the artistic experience of like the deeper impact of like the human interaction between nature and between outdoor adventure. And just kind of seeing your outpouring of that through writing is like it's a really fun reminder that, hey, there's a bigger reason why we do all this stuff. So
Yeah, and I think we all need that reminder sometimes,
yeah.
right? Because probably why all of us got started in the outdoor world is because it touched some part of ourselves beyond like that intrigue of the technical skills. Like it resonated with us on a deeper level, and I think that gets lost sometimes in like the litany of other things, and sort of being brought back to center. This is why we're here. We're here for this moonrise tonight. Like we're not here to like summit this mountain. Like we're here for these moments of beauty and connection, and preserving the possibility to have that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about your education, just kind of your degrees, your certifications, and then kind of what your educational journey has looked like.
I love academics, and I always have. And So I've always pursued like a level of excellence with that, but often with an end goal. My undergrad didn't really have an end goal in mind, because I feel like everyone like needs to have an undergraduate degree these days. It's just like the way our society has gone. And but yeah, I've started my post high school career actually with a graduate program overseas, and then went back and did my undergrad. And like everything, I just find the things that I feel inspired towards and that seem meaningful to me. And so I went and studied inside the West Bank in Palestine, and studied peace and sustainable development in the Middle East. And that was largely driven through that like same desire that drives me to write, of like, we need action here. Like, we need to actually understand what's happening around us. And I have my master's degree in creative writing and teaching English as a second language. And I'm currently working on getting like my teacher licensure for teaching high school. And I think education is like such a great part of life. Like, why not learn things? And so I feel like I'm constantly engaged in some sort of education, and formal or otherwise. And then in terms of certifications I think are really valuable, because it's keeping you at an industry standard. And there's a reason that we have an industry standard. It's for keeping people safe. It's for gear changes. It's for learning the new gear. What was a practice 10 years ago is because whatever it was worked the way it did, and now that's changed. And so when we're certified, we're keeping up, really, is what we're doing with certifications. And I think that's really valuable. And so I hold a number of rock climbing certifications, and at like a high level of river certifications. But I think like the safety piece, like those things, like wilderness first responder and swiftwater rescuer and avalanche courses, I think those are far more important than the guide courses. Because if you can't keep people safe, then it doesn't matter if you can build a good anchor. There are some like baseline things that I think everyone needs to have and really know. So I usually, when I am like up for recertification, I think it's great that I could take a 4-day course and pay a lot less money. I always take the full course again, because things change. And what I learned 4 years ago not only might be different, but if I haven't used that one little skill that was in there, I've forgotten it. And so I think it's really valuable, to be certified in a discipline, and to know that you didn't learn things once and you kind of know, but to know that you can actually keep people safe, including yourself, out in the backcountry. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating too, like the different certifying organizations, how differently they teach skills too. Like I think specifically with wilderness medicine, like just with the different companies out there, they have a different take on, I guess, what's important and the language they use, and like what they'll back you doing in the backcountry. Like some are okay with you reducing a dislocation, and then some are not. And so yes,
like NOLS, AMI, and WMA have gone in the last couple of years like very different directions on wilderness first responder, which I think is really interesting. And I'll hold my opinion on that, because it doesn't really matter. But what matters is that you research the certification that you're getting, and make sure that it's actually meeting your needs and the goals that you've set for yourself or for the company that you're working for, or whatever it is. But you should know how to keep people safe. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think we're kind of coming down to the wire here. Is there any I guess last question, is there any advice or inspiration you could give to the students who may be watching this, who would want to pursue any one of your disciplines, your careers that you've gone for?
I would say be comfortable with vulnerability, and be gentle with yourself as you go through these processes. And you're not always going to be successful with the thing that you're pursuing the first time. It's not always going to be easy, for men or women. There are going to be bosses, and there are going to be days on a mountain, and there will be clients that like are hellacious, and you think like, I hate this. And there will be times when like you've messed up and like you've put someone in danger, you know, be that emotionally or physically, and like embrace that vulnerability. It doesn't mean that you've failed. It means that you need to keep working at it. And if your mindset is being okay to be vulnerable and really like loving the challenge of life, you know, and of being a writer or an educator or a guide, then you're going to be successful. I think so many of us like have these things we aspire to and really want to do and love, and then that first setback like just knocks us dead, and we feel like, oh well, I'm terrible at this and I'll never be, you know, a good guide. And like, no, just means that you're not there right at that moment, and that's okay. And yeah, so embrace the challenge, embrace the vulnerability of putting yourself out there and learning. And that's what we're asking the people around us to do too. And if you don't know how to do that for yourself, you can't expect to like facilitate that experience for other people. And like, it's how we grow, is being vulnerable and making those mistakes and learning how to keep going with it. That's what I got.
That's, geez. Well, I'm inspired. This is awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. Incredible advice. Like, super interesting to hear from your experiences and to learn so much from you in 45 minutes.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me. And yeah, I do love this sort of thing because I love getting to develop those ideas for myself too, and being like, oh yeah, that is one of my like life mottos. I should work on that.
Yeah, just a verbal processing piece. So
yeah, totally.
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and I'll stop recording.